If you ever find yourself walking near the village of Nchera when the sun goes down, and you hear two voices whispering from inside the tree line where no path exists, do not answer them. Do not call out, because the last man who did that was found 3 days later, sitting upright against an odum tree, his mouth sewn shut with vines. And nobody in that village has ever agreed on who did it, or why. Some say it was a jealous man, and some say, quietly, when the fire is low, that it was a woman who loved too much to me. Stay with me to the end of this one, because by the time I finish, you will not know who the villain really was. Drop a comment, tell me where you are watching this from tonight. And if this is your first time here, subscribe, because the stories only get heavier from here. This is the story of Kojo Antwi and Adjoa Mensa, and the forest that swallowed their secret.
Nchera was a small farming village tucked between two rivers, the kind of place where everybody's business belonged to everybody else, except for one patch of land nobody spoke of. The elders called it Kwae Benu, the forest that listens. Nobody hunted there, nobody gathered firewood there, even goats seemed to walk around it. The rule had existed longer than anyone could remember. If you enter Kwae Benu, you may enter in silence, and you must leave in silence, because the forest keeps every voice it hears, and it does not give voices back kindly. Kojo did not believe in that rule, not really, not until the year he fell in love with a woman he was never supposed to want. Adjoa was the daughter of the village priest, promised since childhood to Yao Boating, the son of the chief. It was a match built for peace between two families that had once quarreled over land, and everyone in Nchera treated it as settled, the way you treat the rising of the sun as settled. Nobody asked Adjoa what she wanted. Nobody thought they needed to. But Adjoa had grown up watching Kojo from behind her mother's cooking pots, the boy who made the younger children laugh until they cried, who carried an injured old woman on his back for 2 miles rather than leave her by the roadside. By the time she was 17, she was no longer watching him as a neighbor watches a neighbor. And Kojo, for his part, had stopped pretending he only noticed her out of politeness. They knew what would happen if anyone found out. A broken betrothal was not a small matter in Nchera. It was an insult that could reopen a war between families that had only just learned to sit at the same table. So they did the only thing two frightened, stubborn young people could think of doing. They found the one place in the village where nobody would ever think to look for them, because nobody in their right mind would go there at all. They met in Kwae Benu. At first, it was only a few whispered minutes near the forest edge, close enough to run if someone called their names, far enough that the leaves swallowed their voices before they carried. Kojo told himself the old stories were just that, stories, the kind mothers used to keep children from wandering. Adjoa was not so sure, but love has a way of making you brave about the wrong things. Weeks passed, their meetings grew longer, deeper into the trees, and something strange began happening that neither of them mentioned to the other first. The forest was quiet in a way that felt almost aware. No birds, no insects, only the sound of their own voices, and beneath that, so faint you could convince yourself you imagined it, something like breathing that was not their own. One evening, Adjoa arrived first and sat waiting by the flat grey stone they always met beside. When Kojo emerged from the trees, she was crying, though she tried to hide it. "I heard my name," she told him, "before you came. Someone said my name from behind the stone, in your voice, but you weren't here yet." Kojo laughed it off, though his hands were not steady when he reached for hers. "The forest plays tricks on people who don't belong in it. We'll stop coming here soon once we find another way." They did not stop coming. Where else could they go?
Now here is where the story starts to turn. So listen closely, because nothing that happens next is what it first appears to be. If you have ever loved someone in secret, or kept something hidden to protect the people you cared about, you already understand what's coming, even if you don't want to admit it yet. Comment below and tell me honestly, would you have kept meeting in that forest, knowing what the elders said about it?
The trouble began the night Yao followed Kojo without either of them knowing. Yao was not a cruel man, whatever you might assume about the jilted suitor in a story like this. He was proud, yes, and a little too fond of being right, but he genuinely believed Adjoa would grow to love him the way arranged couples sometimes did, slowly, over years, the way his own parents had. What he could not forgive, what turned something quiet and sad in him into something sharp, was the discovery that she had already given her heart away and had been sneaking into forbidden ground to do it. He did not confront them that first night. He watched from the trees outside Kwaebenu's stage, close enough to see two shapes disappear into the dark, not close enough to hear a single word. And then he did something that would matter more than anyone realized at the time. He told his mother. His mother, Nana Akwa, was the chief's second wife, a woman with a gift for turning small pieces of information into large amounts of power. She did not go to the priest, she did not go to the chief. Instead, she waited and watched and gathered names, because a secret held quietly is worth far more than a secret shouted from the rooftops, especially to a woman who understood that Adjoa's marriage to her son was the only thing standing between two families and the old land dispute reopening like a wound.
3 weeks after Yao first followed them, Adjoa's older sister, Akosua, came to her in tears. "Someone has been telling people," Akosua whispered. "Not the chief, not father, not yet, but someone knows, and they are choosing when to speak, and that is more dangerous than if they had already spoken." Adjoa's first thought went straight to Kojo. Had he told someone, a friend, boasting, careless with a secret that was never his alone to spend? That night, when they met at the grey stone in Kwaebenu, she asked him outright, her voice shaking with something close to accusation. "Did you tell anyone about us?" Kojo looked as though she had struck him. "Never," he said. "I would burn my own tongue out before I gave us away." But doubt, once it enters a hidden love, does not leave quietly. Adjoa searched his face in the dark and found herself wondering, for the very first time, whether the boy who carried old women on his back for 2 miles might also be the kind of boy who talked too freely to friends when he had been drinking palm wine, the kind of boy who didn't understand how fragile all of this really was. She said nothing more that night, but something had cracked, and cracks, once they start, tend to spread. What Adjoa did not know, what none of them knew, was that the person who had actually let something slip was not Kojo at all, and it was not Yao's mother either, not directly. It was Akosua. Akosua had not meant to betray her sister. She loved Adjoa fiercely, had covered for her a dozen times. But Akosua was also quietly and achingly in love with a young farmer named Kwabena, a boy far beneath the priest's family in standing, and one night, trying to explain why she understood forbidden love so well, she had said too much. Not names, not places, just enough. Kwabena repeated a fragment to a friend, who repeated it to another, until it reached ears that knew exactly what to do with it. Akosua never told Adjoa this, perhaps out of shame, or because she told herself the rumor was too vague to trace. She let her sister go on suspecting Kojo instead, because the alternative meant confessing her own carelessness, and Akosua was not brave enough for that. So the suspicion sat between Kojo and Adjoa like a third person at every meeting, unspoken but present, growing heavier each time they met at the grey stone in Kwaebenu. And the forest, if the old stories are to be believed, was listening to every word of it. It was Nana Akwa who finally decided the time had come to strike, not with an accusation, but with something crueler and far more effective, a rumor placed exactly where it would do the most damage, timed exactly when it would hurt the most. 3 days before Adjoa's formal betrothal ceremony to Yao was to be sealed with the drinking of palm wine before both families, Nana Akwa arranged for a servant to discover a piece of cloth from Adjoa's own wrapper, snagged on a branch at the very edge of Kwai Benu, in full view of anyone walking the main path at dawn. By midday, the whole village knew a piece of the priest's daughter's clothing had been found near the forbidden forest. By evening, everyone had their own theory about what it meant, and every theory was worse than the truth. The priest, Adjoa's own father, called her before him, his face carved from stone. "Tell me you have not been going there," he said. "Tell me, and I will believe you, because I raised you to fear that place the way I fear it myself." Adjoa stood in front of her father and made a choice that would haunt her for the rest of her life. She lied. She said the cloth must have blown from the drying line, that she had never once set foot near Kwai Benu, and whoever started this rumor wanted to destroy her marriage before it began. She lied well enough that her father, desperate to believe her, chose to believe her. But Kojo heard the rumor too, and Kojo made a different choice. He went straight to the grey stone that night, breaking every rule of caution they had kept for months, because he needed to know if she had told her father, if she had protected herself by placing the blame elsewhere. He needed to know, more than he ever needed anything, whether the girl he loved would sacrifice him to save herself. She was already there when he arrived, sitting in the dark, and for a long moment neither of them spoke, because both of them were terrified of what the other might have already done. "Did you tell them it was me?" Kojo asked, his voice raw. "Did you say my name to save your own?" The accusation landed like a slap. Adjoa stood up so fast the old stone scraped her ankle. "I lied to protect us both," she said. "I said nothing happened at all, and you come here accusing me of selling you out?" "Someone has been talking for weeks," Kojo said. "Someone let this slip long before that cloth appeared, and I keep asking myself who it could be, and I keep landing on the person who has a sister desperate enough to say anything to anyone who will listen to her." Now, I want you to sit with that moment for a second, because this is the heart of the whole story. Two people who loved each other more than anything, standing in a forbidden forest at night, tearing each other apart over a betrayal that neither of them actually committed. If that doesn't break something in you a little, I don't know what will. And we are not done yet, because Kwai Benu was listening to all of it.
They argued long past the point either of them meant to. Old fears came pouring out. The fear of Yao's family, the fear of the priest's temper, the fear that had lived quietly under their love from the very beginning and had finally found an opening wide enough to climb through. And somewhere in the middle of that argument, the forest around them changed. The insects that had been silent for months suddenly became silent in a different way, a way that felt less like absence and more like something holding its breath and finally letting go. The air grew cold enough that Adjoa's next words came out in visible clouds, and from somewhere behind the grey stone, a third voice joined the argument, low and almost gentle, speaking in Kojo's exact tone. "She lied to her father," the voice said. "Ask her why." Adjoa froze. Kojo froze. Neither of them had spoken those words. Then, from somewhere else entirely, a voice that was unmistakably Adjoa's own, though her mouth had not moved, answered back. "He accused my sister. Ask him why he needed someone else to blame." The old stories were true. The forest had been listening the whole time, gathering every accusation, every fear, every unkind word they had ever spoken to each other in its shelter. And now, when their trust had finally worn thin enough, it was giving those words back to them, twisted just enough to sound like confessions.
Kojo grabbed Adjoa's hand, and for the first time that night, they were not afraid of each other. They were afraid together of the same thing. "Run," he said. "Do not answer it. Whatever it says, do not answer." They ran, hand in hand, branches tearing at their clothes, the voices behind them multiplying, throwing back every private word either of them had ever said inside that forest, weaponizing months of whispered doubts and midnight fears until it was impossible to tell which voice belonged to the forest and which belonged to the memory of themselves. Adjoa stumbled once, and it was Kojo who caught her, who refused to let go even as the voices screamed her name in his own voice from every direction at once. They broke free of the tree line just as the eastern sky was beginning to lighten, collapsing onto the path outside Kwabeno, gasping, alive, and utterly changed. Here is the part of the story that split this village down the middle for a generation, and I suspect it is about to do the same thing to the people watching this right now. Adjoa went through with her betrothal ceremony to Yao 3 days later, not because she stopped loving Kojo, but because she told herself quietly that a love which could turn to accusation so quickly in the dark might not have been strong enough to survive daylight either. Kojo did not stop her. He told himself the same thing, that if she truly trusted him, she would have found a way to refuse the marriage entirely, forest or no forest, family or no family. Neither of them ever learned that it was Akoswa's whispered confession to a farmer boy that started the rumor, not Kojo's carelessness at all. Akoswa carried that secret to her grave decades later, and some say it was that secret, more than anything else, that kept her from ever marrying the farmer she loved. Adjoa lived out her life as Yao's wife, and by most accounts theirs became a quiet, steady kind of marriage, not the fire she had once known with Kojo, but not without its own gentleness either. Kojo married a woman from a neighboring village 2 years later and never spoke of Kwabeno again, not even, it is said, on his deathbed when his youngest granddaughter asked him if the old stories about the forest were true. He only told her, "Never raise your voice at someone you love in a quiet place. Some places remember, and they will use it against you when you least expect it." To this day, the elders of Nkera still warn young people never to speak inside Kwabeno, not because the forest will curse you outright, but because of what it will do with your voice if it catches you unkind. Some say the forest didn't create the betrayal between Kojo and Adjoa at all. It simply took the doubt that was already quietly rotting inside their love, and it held up a mirror to it at the exact moment they were both too frightened and too tired to recognize their own reflections. And that is what still divides people whenever this story is told around the fire in Nkera, and I suspect it will divide you too. Was the forest the villain of this story, twisting innocent fear into cruelty? Or did it simply reveal a truth that Kojo and Adjoa had been too afraid to face all along, that their love, however real, had never quite been strong enough to survive being tested?
Was Akoswa the true betrayer for her silence, or was she simply a frightened girl who made one careless mistake and paid for it with a lifetime of guilt? And what does it say about any of us, that the words we are most afraid to hear back are so often the ones already sitting quietly in our own hearts? I want you to answer that honestly in the comments below, because I have heard people argue about this story for hours, and I do not think there is a clean answer. Until next time, keep your voice steady, keep your doubts to yourself when it matters most, and never, ever speak inside the forbidden forest.